Welcome to the Carriker Chronicles, the People Show. Checking the pulse of Husker Nation, brought to you by... One second. Let's not get carried away. Brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net, also carrikerchronicles.com. It's where all your Husker sports hopes and dreams will come true. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just science. All right, we're going to talk about the coordinators today. We're going to talk about Dana Holgorsen, John Butler, what you can expect from them going forward in the future, what the offense is going to look like, what the defense is going to look like, what in the blue hell is going on with Ed Foley, at least my take on it so far. But if you are like me and you believe that just the simple addition of Dana Holgorsen, if nothing else happened, other things have happened, but if nothing else happened, and we just added Dana Holgorsen to this coaching staff, then Nebraska's coaching staff, especially on offense, will be better next year. Then smash the like button. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. The players are still going to be committing from the transfer portal. All right, we are still working on a special interview for New Year's Day. Hopefully we're able to get that figured out. And bear with us on the way back from New York, one of our sound equipment pieces. We need to get a new one, so bear with us until we get a new one. But subscribe, ring that notification bell, because there's going to be all sorts of updates, transfer portal updates, interviews, things of that nature going on, going forward, and throughout the offseason. Now, one of the things Nebraska really needs, and I'm going to get into the skill position players that we have on offense, guys coming back, transfer portal guys, experienced quarterback, backup quarterback, all this stuff. We need offensive line help. We can't be out there trying to play 7-on-7 or flag football because we're struggling to block still. We've got to get offensive line help. Ben Scott is done. Bryce Benhart is done. Kerner Corcoran, his future is up in the air. Teddy Prohaska is trying to come back from a third serious knee injury. That's up in the air. We need some help up front. So there's going to be announcements soon. The number 2 offensive tackle in the transfer portal, 6'5", 315 pounds from Washington State. By the way, Washington State lost their head coach and 32 players to the transfer portal. Their quarterback went to Oklahoma. He was like the number 1 player in the transfer portal when he committed to the Sooners. Anyways, I digress. But 4-star offensive tackle, the number 2 offensive tackle in the transfer portal, all right, Falili Famoa has narrowed it down to Nebraska and Michigan. And he would be a really good player at a high position of need for the Huskers. The feeling I get right now is Nebraska's got a little bit of the inside track to getting this guy, at least at the moment. And truly, this would be a big-time get. I don't talk about every single guy that transfers in or every single guy that we're recruiting or going after. That's just not how I roll. I try to pick out the things that stand out the most and the players that stand out the most. So he's going to be announcing soon. We'll see what happens. Now, if you didn't know, Nebraska's got a top 10 transfer portal class in the entire country. All right, the number 2 class in the Big Ten, right behind Wisconsin, a top 20 recruiting class, and we got 2 of the top 10 transfer portal wide receivers in the country. Basically, Dane Key was Kentucky's best wide receiver. Isaiah Hunter was Cal's best wide receiver. They're both coming to Nebraska. We need an offensive lineman. We actually need an offensive tackle and an interior offensive lineman, either a guard and or a center, because Justin Evans-Jenkins can play both, to come help with the O-line. And if we can get that, we're able to accomplish some help up front, along with the skill position guys we got, and I'll dive more into that in a second, plus what you can expect from Dana Holgorsen. And again, we brought in some quarterback depth, former 4-star quarterback from Purdue, who's a young, talented guy who's going to come in and add some depth in our quarterback room. All right, this offense could be pretty fun to watch next year. Like, I legit believe we could be a top 5 offense in the Big Ten. I know that's insanity. That's crazy. How dare you have a positive attitude? Okay. But when you got young talent like we have, you've got experienced guys like we brought in through the transfer portal, and I'm probably going to bring in some more, and then an experienced quarterback and a proven offensive coordinator. It's not outside the realm of being crazy to think that we could be in the top third of the Big Ten in offense next year. Again, we're going to talk about Dana. We're going to talk about John Butler and Ed Foley. But when it comes to Dana, looking at all the offensive coordinators in the country, I consider Dana Holgorsen and Chip Kelly to be the 2 best. All right, it just doesn't help that they've both been head coaches elsewhere. Yes, it does. That does matter. I will say this. After watching Chip Kelly in that Michigan game, that is one of the most god-awful game plans I've ever seen. One of the most, like, it was a really bad play calling day for Chip Kelly. Also, an early interception, and I by Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback, and I think they were like, oh boy, we don't want to hand this game to Michigan. Then they handed the game to Michigan. But my point is, I think Dana Holgorsen may be the best offensive coordinator in the country. He's absolutely in that conversation, at least. Now, again, Dane Key, okay, he's the number 1 offensive transfer portal player out of everyone that's coming into the Big Ten. He's the number 1 offensive player coming into the Big Ten, joining the Big Red this year. 6'3", 210 pounds. He averaged over 15 yards per reception a year ago. This was a receiving core that really struggled to get off man press, that really struggled to create separation versus DBs for Nebraska last year, and we really struggled to get any sort of big plays out of our wide receivers. So he's going to come in and he's going to help with that. Last year, if you wanted to beat Nebraska on defense, just man us across the board, blitz the house, and we were going to struggle to protect, and Raiola took off a few times. We got to work on sliding, but I digress. Also, Isaiah Hunter, the number 8 offensive player out of all the players that are joining the Big Ten this upcoming season. He's the number 8 offensive player coming into the Big Ten Conference, 6'2", 210 pounds. He averaged nearly 15 yards per reception as well. All right, the young guys we have coming back and the talented guys we have coming back. We have an experienced quarterback and Dylan Raiola coming back. This is an individual, if you didn't know, set the record in Nebraska. Dylan Raiola is now the record holder in Nebraska for most passing yards in a season by a freshman quarterback. He surpasses the mark of 2,617 yards set by Adrian Martinez in 2018. Ja'Cory Barney, obviously he'll be back. Ja'Cory Barney's 55th catch of the season makes him tied for the all-time leader in receptions by a freshman at Nebraska. He matches the mark of 55 receptions set by J.D. Spielman in 2017. Our clear number 1 running back is back. You got to keep in mind, there was games this year where Emmett Johnson either didn't get a carry or only got 1 carry. So when you look at these stats, Holgorsen understands how to use Raiola. Raiola's completion percentage significantly increased over the last 4 games. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Emmett Johnson's production significantly increased. Like Holgorsen understands how to use and has a good rapport with Raiola as well as Emmett Johnson. The first 9 games of the year, Emmett ran the ball 58 times. The last 4 games, exactly 58 times. You can look on the screen. He had 284 rush yards the first 9 games versus 307 the last 4 games. His yards per carry went from 4.8 to 5.29. He had twice as many touchdowns, more receptions, more receiving yards. Okay, so we have a clear number 1 running back and a coordinator that understands how to use him. You look at Heinrich Haarberg. He's going to be a tight end, but I think he's going to be a Swiss Army knife tight end. I think he's going to be a guy that's moved all over the place because he has the best top-end speed of anybody on the team. I talked about that in a video about a month ago. Did you watch him in the bowl game? The dude blocks. He's physical. He represented for quarterbacks out there today. I know he's at a tight end, but you go straight to tight end and you start blocking like that, the dude's just a football player. He's a Swiss Army knife. So don't forget about Carter Nelson. This is a guy who's just an athlete. Obviously, he's listed as a tight end, played wide receiver some last year. He's so athletic, they put him in at running back on the goal line at Purdue so he could try to jump over the pile to get in, if you remember that. The play didn't go well. I just don't like that type of play. But these are Swiss Army knife type guys that Dana Holgorsen can move like chess pieces within his offense. Now, to be clear, I'm not coming out and saying we're going to have the number 1 offense in the country or any of this or that. But there's legit reason for optimism, okay? We have talent. We've got depth, especially at skill positions, okay? And we have guys with experience that we're bringing in through the transfer portal, guys with previous production. Again, including the quarterback has experience now. This is all things we haven't had in like 10 years here at Nebraska. Again, we need linemen. We need O-linemen. We need depth up front on the O-line. We don't have 5 clear starters right now. Now, don't forget, we got guys like Grant Bricks, okay, who is a 4-star coming out of high school. An offensive line, maybe he ends up starting at one of the guard spots. Gunnar Gatula was a freshman, and he ended up playing a lot last year due to injury to Prohaska. Corcoran was out as well. Let me grab this paper I dropped because I also, Preston Tamua, a 4-star out of Hawaii, another offensive lineman who could come in and maybe contribute next year. But again, none of these guys have any proven experience, which is why I want help up front via the portal as well as some of these young guys who are talented. Now, if we can get that, instead of being bottom 3rd in the Big Ten in most statistical categories, and I'm being kind because we were at the bottom of the bottom 3rd in some of them, and in the 90s in the country. Okay, so we're like next to Akron in some of these statistical categories, by the way. Next year, we could easily be top 3rd. And here's why. Consider USC. They just lost their top 2 wide receivers, their top tight end, Miller Moss transferred as well. Trojan fans are borderline panicking. Now, I know they won their bowl game against Texas A&M. They're actually 2-0 this year versus SEC teams. They beat LSU. They beat Texas A&M. Yeah, SEC, the NFL of college football. Ha! Probably the best conference, but not as good as they say. I digress. You got Penn State, who's going to have Drew Aller back. But you got USC with a bunch of question marks. You got Penn State, who's going to have Drew Aller back. But they still don't know who they are on offense. If you've watched them this year, what are they? I don't even know. Michigan's kind of starting over. Our biggest question mark, as I've mentioned, is our O-line. If we can address that, and actually take care of the football on offense, I think being a top 5, top 6, top third offense in the Big Ten, I think it's very, very possible and very realistic. Now, what can we expect from Dana Holgorsen as an offensive coordinator? Here's what you can expect. You can expect him to do the common sense thing. Like last year, we're going to simplify the offense for a young quarterback. We're going to start and give the ball to our best running back. We're going to put guys in the appropriate positions so they can be successful. And then he's going to move around like chess pieces. Now, he's not bringing in the air raid. He said that. But he wants to throw the ball. He wants to throw the ball to set up the run. And sometimes screens, when they're blocked properly, are an extension of the run game. But even in our bowl game, we threw the ball 32 times. We ran the ball 32 times. It's not as unbalanced as you might think. He's a guy who has a lot of experience and has had a lot of success as an offensive coordinator. Look at the defense. John Butler on defense. We probably have more question marks on defense, especially when it comes to the personnel. This isn't supposed to be a personnel show, but all 3 of our defensive line starters are gone. Talking about Ty Robinson. I want to give a quick shout out to Ty, by the way. Oh, I forgot to mention Dylan Raiola in that bowl game, a muddy, wet bowl game, completed 74.2% of his passes. I told you, under Holgorsen, his completion percentage went up significantly. That was his second highest completion percentage of the season, behind his 76.7% that he had against Colorado. I will say this about Dylan. I'm not always a fan of these little sidearm throws. Let's just get really good at the basic fundamentals and techniques of throwing. And he's a talented guy. He's going to be a really good player for us next year. But let's work on the deep ball, which is ironic because coming out of high school, the deep ball was a strength of his. And footwork, which is normal for a young quarterback. And I don't know, sliding, just a thought. But shout out to Ty Robinson, who had 5 quarterback pressures in the Pinstripe Bowl, the most by any defensive tackle in a bowl game this season. Also, here's a pretty cool picture of Bryce Benhart and Ty Robinson at the high school All-American game 6 years ago, 2019, the day before they enrolled at Nebraska. Think about everything these two have been through. Think about how highly sought after and recruited they both were, by the way. Benhart was the number 1 player in Minnesota. Ty Robinson was highly recruited and sought after. So think about that. All right, 6 years later, here's Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker at the end of their last games, ending their careers at Nebraska. But all 3 starters on the defensive line are gone, from Robinson and Nash Hutmaker to Jamari Butler. But Cam Lenhart is back. Now, he started some games in the past. Elijah Judy is back. Riley Van Poppel, who played a bunch in the bowl game. Keona Davis is back. These guys are very, very talented. We have a talented front. Gabe Moore, the transfer from Mississippi State, also has a high upside. But again, a lot of these guys are very inexperienced, very young, not a lot of experience, a lot of underclassmen. Now, we may add more transfers throughout the offseason. I will say this. I do believe there's 3 good starters in this group, but then the question becomes, what depth do we have? So we not only need 3 starters to emerge, which I do believe we can get, but we need depth to emerge on the front of the defensive line as well. Now, we're going to be young at linebacker, but we may be more athletic at linebacker than we've been in 1 to 2 decades. Okay, you look at a guy like Vincent Shavers, who got a black shirt during the bowl prep. During the bowl game, 2 TFLs, a sack, a forced fumble. The guy was all over the place. You look at some of the other guys that we're bringing in. Dawson Merritt, who Matt Rule has said he kind of wants him to come in and help play right away. Christian Jones, who won the Buckus Award as the top linebacker in the entire country, the high school Buckus Award. You got still Pierce Mooberry's kind of getting overlooked. He's a 4-star here from the great state of Nebraska. I know he's undersized, so we'll see how that plays out. Get in the weight room, but hopefully he can help sooner rather than later. Willis McGahee, who played a lot in the bowl game. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but coming out of high school, some colleges recruited him to play running back, just like his dad. That's how athletic he is. Edge rusher, transfer Williams and Warray, and we're going to put it up on the screen here. He is the top defensive player via the transfer portal coming into the Big Ten Conference this year. And here's that picture showing Nebraska having the number 2 transfer portal class in the Big Ten, number 10 in the country. Don't forget a guy like Oklahoma linebacker safety transfer Dawson McCullough, a guy who was all Big Ten and in some publications All-American as a freshman at Indiana. Now, the past 2 years at Oklahoma, he's only played in 17 games. So again, absurdly talented. Is he still proven, though? I don't know. I should mention senior Javin Wright, who, and I quote, has been to hell and back, end quote, battling injuries this year. I've heard that he's applying for another year of eligibility. We'll see how that plays out. Now, this isn't supposed to be a personnel show, like I mentioned, but I could talk about that all day, and I will talk about it more in future shows. Guys like Idaho transfer Andrew Marshall, who is the top DB in the Big Sky Conference, the only cornerback in the Big Sky to make first team all-conference. Bly Hill's going to be back. Okay, from injuries, he was supposed to be a starting corner for us at the end of spring last year. And then true freshman at a DB out of Omaha, Donovan Jones. All right, how about Donovan Jones coming out of nowhere? The true freshman from Omaha North, redshirted this season. He played 55 snaps, fifth most on D at corner versus Boston College. Now, a lot of people thought he'd play safety, but he had 3 tackles, 1 tackle for loss versus BC. Now, what will the defense look like under John Butler? Now, first and foremost, I'm just going to be blunt. There was a lot of disagreement among the defensive coaches last year with what they wanted to do, whether it be coverages, whether it be in general. So you're going to see a coaching staff that's more on the same page this year. All right, you're going to see more blitzing and more attacking style of defense. You saw that versus Boston College. A lot more tackles for loss, a lot more sacks. Can we prevent the big plays on the back end? But there's going to be a lot more man-to-man type coverage, a lot more NFL type disguises and coverages in the red zone specifically. Now, I love Tony White. He's a great coach. And honestly, we're going to miss him. But one thing I think John Butler does do a little bit better than Coach White did is in-game adjustments. Coach White would have a great game plan. I felt like in-game adjustments sometimes took a little bit longer. I think Coach Butler is going to be better at that specific thing. Every coach has their strength. If Nebraska's defense can just keep the status quo, just be equal to, greater than would be great. Can we be equal to or greater than what we were this past year? Which honestly, we were better 2 years ago on defense. Can we just be equal to or maybe greater than what we did this past year? And I think that'd be all right for most people. Now, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, DPS Concrete Construction, your local concrete experts. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no one better. When it comes to concrete work, when it comes to retaining wall work, they do a phenomenal job. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net. Also, Bonzel Pool and Spa. Check them out at bonzelpool.com. They put in my family's pool, my family's hot tub. If you got saunas and you want them, they got them. If you have them and you need them taken care of, or a hot tub and a pool and you need them taken care of, they're the folks to do it. Go to bonzelpool.com. Let's talk about Ed Foley. My show yesterday, I went into great depth with a bunch of stats. I'll do some topical ones here, but if you want to hear more of the in-depth stats, go check out the show I put out yesterday. We average getting almost one of our kicks blocked per game, whether it's a PAT, a field goal, or a punt. We've had 10 block kicks on the year in 13 games that we played. We're averaging a whopping 4 yards per punt return. And you think back to the Illinois game, what was it, like a 34-yard field goal that we missed? And we would have won that game. You think back to multiple games. You think back to the Rutgers game, you think where we had multiple punts blocked. You think back to Boston College, where they block our PAT, return it for 2 points. And the special teams ultimately was responsible for giving the Eagles 9 points in the bowl game. At one point in the game, we were up 13-2, and we had about a 35-yard field goal, yet we faked it on 4th and 5. Why would we do that? Why would you not go up 16-2 and go up by 2 touchdowns? Either Matt rules like it's a bowl game and screw it, or he just doesn't trust the order of operations, which is the snap, the hold, and the kick to actually go through. That might be part of it, too. Here's a couple other things. All right, this is something I put on social media. We're last in the Big Ten in punt returns, tied for last in net punting. You get the idea. All right, here's something the coordination put out, talking about Matt Rule and one of his quotes. And I quote, "Special teams, we need a complete and total overhaul of that," Rule said. "We have to be better at that. I put those things on my shoulder to get it done. It has not been good this year," end quote. Check out the end of this tweet. He did not say if that would include replacing Ed Foley. And I thought that was a key part of that tweet. Now, here's the thing with Ed Foley. He's a great ambassador. He'll go to small towns in Nebraska, and he'll go to runs, and he'll chat with people, and he's very personable. You hear nothing but great things, friendly with people. I was highly critical of him this year. I went to practice. He looked me in the eye, and he shook my hand. I respect him. I respect his career. He's been coaching for over 3 decades. I respect his resume. I respect a lot of those things. Now, we brought in a new long snapper, an FCS All-American. Okay, we brought in a new punter, a 3-year starter from Washington, and John Hull seems like he's probably going to be a decent kicker going forward. He made 8 straight field goals at one point this year. And the last 2 field goals that didn't go great, it was the snap at Iowa, okay, and then the block against Boston College. So maybe those things are kind of maybe addressed and fixed. We're finally using Ja'Cory Barney and Quentin Ives and Jeremiah Charles, who's insanely explosive, ran track for Nebraska last spring. He also, if you remember, last winter, when the Nebraska football team had the dunk contest, he won the dunk contest by jumping over Matt Rule and dunking it to win. The dude is an athlete. He's an explosive athlete. We're finally using them to return kicks. Here's my question. Why weren't we doing that before? I'm literally reading it. Why weren't we doing that before? Why does it take Dana Holgorsen coming here for that to happen? Also, the fact that we have to go specifically get guys from the portal to do basic little things like snap the ball tells you something. So with all due respect, I have not seen Ed Foley be a good special teams coach. The past 2 years here at Nebraska have been bad, and that's putting it kindly. All right, it's not a 1 year sample size. It's 2 years now. And I think this last year was worse than the first year. So I have not seen Ed Foley be a good special teams coach. I have this weird feeling, though. I do, and it's just a gut feeling that he might be staying. I don't know that. It's just a gut feeling that I have. Now, what do I believe should happen? With all due respect to Ed Foley, this isn't him or anyone else. It's never personal. We're trying to win football games. We're trying to go to big bowl games. Actually, screw that. We're trying to go to the CFP eventually one day, which Dylan Raiola actually talked about after the bowl game, one step at a time, to be clear. But that's what we're trying to do. And a special teams unit like what we've had the past 2 years is going to severely hinder that. Okay. So what do I believe is best? I believe you get a new special teams coordinator and you do a complete overhaul, which is basically what Matt Rule said. And you start kind of from scratch and you've addressed some of these things with a snapper and a punter and all those good things. I think that's what should happen. I don't know what will happen for sure. It was so bad this past year, I'm going to be honest with you. It would have been unacceptable for a middle school football team on special teams. I don't see how you can keep Ed Foley, with all due respect. If he does stay, if he is retained, here's what you might hear. Foley has coached under Matt Rule 10 of the 12 seasons that Matt Rule's been a head coach. He has coached special teams for 12 years, Foley has. In his 7 years specifically as a college football special teams coordinator, he's had a top 25 special teams unit, top 25 special teams unit 4 times, not in Nebraska. Again, I don't know what'll happen. I know what my gut says. I just don't see how you can keep him. My brain says my gut is insane for feeling that way. Here's what I will say. Whatever Rule does, I hope he gets it right, because this is a big decision. Because here's why. Our special teams have been a liability. They have flat out cost us games. Iowa almost cost us games, and they will cost us games in the future if they don't vastly improve. And there's no way, with the way the special teams are, that we can compete for anything above a 500 record year in, year out. You just can't do that against really good teams. I guess 7-6, that would be our ceiling. Can we just be average on special teams? Can we just be average? Can we just not cost ourselves football games? That's all I would ask. And then there's this thing called Beamer Ball. Remember Frank Beamer of Virginia Tech? He would go around and he'd beat more talented teams and he'd beat better teams because he was the special teams coordinator. He emphasized special teams, and they would beat teams with special teams. That's not even on the radar right now for Nebraska. But those things are possible in the college football universe. So in summation, our offensive coaching will absolutely be better. Our defensive coaching, can it just be equal to or greater than last year? Just top 20. All right? And we were 11 in the country the year before that, I might add. Special teams. My thought is it can't be any worse, right? Well, unless we make the wrong decision. So I will say this. I do know some coaches' contracts expire tomorrow. I do know there's also a 12-month rollover, and there's no longer a 10 assistant coach limit. So there's so many things the Rule can do with all these different coaches, including Foley. Does he let him go? Does he let it expire? Does he retain him? Does he retain him as the coordinator? Does he retain him but in a different role, an analyst or some other type of role? I don't know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, check out the website, CarrikerChronicles.com. We've got all your press conferences, your bowl game press conferences. I put out a bunch of shorts. They always are under Adam's section. You'll see Carriker Chronicles, the Adam Carriker Show in shorts, a bunch of short little videos on all sorts of things. You can check them out. And we're talking basketball, merchandise. Here are my questions for you fine folks at home after you check out CarrikerChronicles.com. Questions. Number 1. By the way, the Big Ten and the SEC, the two best conferences in the country. If you're a top 5 offense, which I mentioned earlier in the Big Ten, you could be a top 20 offense in the country, which I also mentioned earlier. Do you believe Nebraska will be a top 20 offense next year? If we're just top 5 in the Big Ten, I think we're top 20 in the country. Number 2, will our defense stay a top 20 defense? Number 3, will our special teams just be average? All right, so until next time, Husker Nation, go Big Red Nose. Remember to throw the ball.